Hi, this is Antoine Harris with Platinum Bridge Wealth Strategies, and I'm doing a new series on generational wealth. I have many clients that have done a great job working throughout their career, running an excellent business. They've accumulated a decent amount of wealth, but they really don't have a strategic game plan for passing that wealth on to the next generation once they've been able to utilize those resources for their own living expenses during their lifetime. So this is an area that doesn't get a lot of focus. So I wanted to talk about some strategies that you can start to think about now that you can preemptively implement to make sure that you're maximizing the wealth that gets to the next generation. The first thing I see, many people simply don't even have an estate plan to begin with. A lot of people will have a will, they'll think that is sufficient, but people need to understand the federal law around the taxation of their estate as well as the state law that applies where you live. So some states also have an estate tax in addition to the federal estate tax that you may have to pay. And some states have an inheritance tax that would be paid by the beneficiary. So the estate taxes are paid by the estate. There's a final tax return that's filed by the state, and the estate tax thresholds change over time. So right now at the federal level, it's nearly $14 million. Some states, if they have an estate tax, the threshold is much lower. So it's important to understand the law and the rules for your state so that you can properly prepare and protect those assets. As I mentioned, some states also impose an inheritance tax. Now that's not paid by the estate. That's paid by the actual beneficiary. So you could be thinking that you're leaving a nice asset to a beneficiary, a relative, a friend, and then they're going to be potentially hit with a tax that they have to pay for the privilege of inheriting that asset. So it's important to understand those rules and how you may be able to protect and advise the people that you love around receiving assets and then protecting assets preemptively on your end. So it may make sense to have a trust set up, certain types of trust that can structure around avoiding probate. Now, the probate process in some states is very expensive and very complicated. In other states, it's rather simple. So having a perspective and talking with a financial advisor or a professional state tax attorney can help you prepare and optimize those assets so the most money is passed down to the next generation in a very efficient fashion. The next mistake that I see is really beneficiaries that are inadequately prepared to receive a significant amount of money. So I've had clients that have had a rather substantial inheritances and run through them very quickly. They didn't know how to manage money. They didn't understand how investments worked. Their loved one passed away. They received an inheritance and we had it set up and they went through it very quickly, despite the fact that I was trying in real time to advise them on how to manage the money. They simply didn't have a good perspective. So going through and talking to your kids, talking to your loved ones, having a governance plan for your family that you talk about on an annual basis, well before you pass away, helping them understand what the assets are earmarked for. There are certain types of trusts you can also put in place that limit the amount of money that can come out. You can still adequately fund the expenses for your loved ones while they're living, but you can have it structured where those assets come out over time or for specific purposes. For example, you can have a trust available once your loved one reaches a certain age or hits certain milestones. If they're married or if they start a business, you can structure all this and set those parameters around the trust to help make sure that those assets are spent the way you perceive those assets to have been spent. So you can control your assets basically from the grave if you structure those trust assets properly. You also may have a loved one with special needs and they're not adequately capable of handling those assets. There are special needs trusts that you could set up and have those distributed through the help of a professional trustee. Now, a professional trustee is a third party that will look at the trust document and deliver those assets based upon the rules of the trust and how they were established by you while you were alive so that your needs were met, that the needs of your loved one are met, and that those assets come out in a very efficient and strategic manner. One of the things that I've done with my own children while they're very young is really talking to them about the types of companies that they interact with to help promote an interest in investing. So, for example, I have some boys that they play flag football. They happen to wear Nike cleats and Nike athletic wear. So I've talked to them about Nike as a company and then buying Nike stock for them so that they can start to say, hey, a part owner of this company that I admire. And that's really been a good way for me to introduce investing to them and start them along the journey of educating them around how wealth is created and being able to be responsible enough to receive some wealth ultimately once they have an inheritance. Another mistake that I see is really people not understanding different vehicles that are perfectly legal, very accessible, that are in place to allow you to legally avoid estate taxes or an inheritance tax. So one example is through life insurance. So life insurance, while it has no income tax, it is part of your taxable estate. So if you leave a significant life insurance policy, a good portion of that may be eaten up with an estate tax. There are certain types of trusts where you could have the life insurance as a part of the trust and avoid it being part of the estate. There are different things if you own a business where you could set up certain types of insurance policies or different types of trust to protect the assets of your business so that they pass to the next generation efficiently. What I like to do with clients is before they meet with their estate tax attorney, we lay out what their priorities are, and we talk about what they would like to have happen when they are no longer here. It's a less expensive way to get the estate process laid out versus brainstorming with an attorney when you're on the clock and being charged by in 10, 15-minute increments around how you want your estate structured. So when they leave our meeting, they have a very good outline for what they want to accomplish, and then they can have that effectuated with the help of a professional attorney that's licensed in their state. Another big mistake that I see are families assuming that they just want to divide all their assets equally amongst their heirs. Now, for many reasons, that may not be a good idea. So, for example, if you have real estate assets and you have one of your children happens to be very well versed in real estate development or real estate sales or real estate management, perhaps that child may be better equipped to handle an inheritance of real estate versus some of the other children. Or maybe there's going to be infighting because you now have one property divided amongst three beneficiaries, and one may want to sell it and one may want to hold on to it for legacy, etc. And then they're going back and forth and having an issue. If you talk to your family, you may have someone in your family that would love to own the real estate that you leave behind. Another person in your family may not want to be bothered with real estate. This is just an example. I also have clients where their kids are in different tax brackets. So if you have, say, a 401k or an IRA account that you leave to one of your children in a very high tax bracket, they're going to be forced to make distributions from that IRA account. Every time you do a distribution from an IRA account or a 401k account, you have to pay income taxes. So if you have a child in a very high tax bracket, you're basically giving them a very big tax bill that they may not want nor need. You may have another child in a lower tax bracket who could take those assets and pay a much lower level of tax. So in effect, you are preserving assets within your family by thinking through which of your beneficiaries may get which assets in the most tax efficient manner. And it's all about communication. It's all about planning. So this is something that you would discuss with a financial advisor to make sure that those assets are distributed equitably and efficiently. Another very common and very big mistake that I see business owners make specifically is not having a clear succession plan well before they're in a position where they want to leave the business. So many of my clients own small businesses that are very successful. They have built up law firms or different restaurant businesses, et cetera. And they are the brand. So a lot of the value of the business is their expertise or their presence in that business. So when they pass away, the value of the business will decline. So what I always encourage my clients to do is really start to identify someone that you like to pass the business to, or someone that may want to purchase that business from you. It may or may not be a family member, but invariably these people need to be trained. They need to be put out on the forefront to start to establish their own brand equity so that business remains a going concern. If you're selling the business outside of the family, then that would preserve an inheritance for your family. So if you own a business and your kids are not interested or equipped to handle the business and you pass away, basically you pass an asset on that's depreciated dramatically in value because you are no longer present in that business. If you're able to sell the business to an outside entity and have some of those payments go to your heirs by contract, then what you've done is basically preserve the value that you've worked so hard to build in that business for the next generation. If you have children that are equipped and are interested, that there may be certain types of life insurance policies that you could put in place to make sure that there's a payout to those business owners for different expenses that may occur when you're no longer in the business. So these are things that we need to think through, that we need to structure. And it's part of a conversation that we have for business owners when we're doing our comprehensive planning. There's another really big mistake that I see people making all the time is that they don't have their estate plan structured properly to protect against potential liability. So this applies to business owners and just successful professionals. You may leave money to your son or daughter, and then they get married, and those assets are now subject to a potential divorce in the future. So how do you start to think about different liability issues around protecting that inheritance for the people that you love and that you care about? I also see situations where someone may inherit an asset and they don't have the right types of trust around how those assets were passed down. So it's subject to their creditors. So if you have a child or a beneficiary that may be sued for some reason or may be in significant debt for some reason, some of these assets could be exposed. So how do you think about that preemptively? Are you having those conversations with your loved ones? And how do you structure the estate plan to be protective to make sure that those assets are available for the people that you care about? These are all questions that need to be addressed with professionals. I think a good starting place would be with your financial advisor. If you have any questions, this is Antoine Harris with Platinum Bridge Wealth Strategies. I'll talk to you soon. Please look for additional information that I'm going to be putting out around how to protect your wealth, multi-generational wealth, and strategies that you can implement on a daily basis preemptively to get to your goals around protecting your wealth for the people that you love. I'll talk to you soon.